Hello, I'm mckay, author of Heather, Fubar, Sourced Up, and Chameleon, in case any of you out there didn't realise. Today, I am back with another book review, in case you haven't guessed. And yeah, there's going to be more of these coming. Let's just leave it at that for now. And there'll be different other types of videos also on the way. So yeah, it's Sunday, so fuck it. Today, I want to take a look at Straw Dogs by John Gray. I have spoken of this piece quite a few times already. A few of you out there will realise that I brought it up on the podcast. I know some of you actually got in touch and mentioned that you've purchased it on a few things I said already on it. So I hope you enjoyed the read. I mean, I've read it twice now, maybe even three times, because it's not something you don't have to read it linearly. Really, you can kind of dip in and out. Depends on your mood. Each part is, between 1 to 2 or 3 pages, so it's very easy to just pick it up, see what he has to say on a certain subject that is normally within the realm of what he's talking about, and then leave it to brew in your subconscious. And that's mainly why I'm reviewing it today, is because this book has just been in my mind quite a lot, and I've read it now probably about, I'd say probably 12 weeks ago at least, maybe longer. And I loved it the first read. I think it's a great companion piece to something like The Conspiracy Against the Human Race or anything by Quran. It's just got this kind of, or Schopenhauer especially, actually, because his philosophical outlook and the pessimism, which obviously goes with that, is very on the same level. And it is just a cutting and biting kind of polemic against humanism. And mostly throughout its history, and then what it means for today's human beings, and how it connects so much to religious thinking or the Enlightenment era, and how all of these things have this kind of deluded outlook that doesn't realize that it is just a natural progression from, say, believing in a deity to believing in the self. And because that base is always on a religious ground, it can't move away from it. So Gray attacks Nietzsche in particular and the concept of the Übermensch. I mean, really, and as appealing as the Übermenschian ideal might be to some of us out there, I have to admit that I do also find it a bit ridiculous, mainly because it seems to, like Dostoevsky did with Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, it gives this notion of being above everything. So if you're of a certain intellect or physical capability, that puts you above the average person in the masses. So it's already got a kind of psychopathic element to it, and especially a narcissistic one. And again, with Nietzsche's "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," it's already within the realm of narcissism and messiah complex, essentially. I mean, that book in particular is a guy coming down from the mountains to declare that not only God is dead, but what we need to do is listen to me, because I know exactly what needs to be done next, and how humans, again, can evolve from their beliefs of old. And then, it's all about being progressive, essentially. And Gray's like, nah, this is just more deluded gobbledygook. It's all based off religious Western thought that concentrates way too much on individualism and believes in stuff that is, you know, bollocks, really, in a word. He is British, so I think he might appreciate me using that word. But yeah, it's what I mean. Again, I found, and I'm referring to Conspiracy again with this, but I found it to be a very relaxing read in a sense, and I think a lot of you guys out there will also feel that way. But people outside of this channel in particular they won't even look at it, I don't think. But even if they were to, I think they'd be easily dismissive of some of its claims. Um, and I think the only time I might agree with them would be that Gray doesn't dive too deeply into some of the subjects he brings up. But again, because it is an aphoristic kind of thoughts, basically, it's just thoughts on certain concepts, as the subtitle suggests, thoughts on humans and other animals. Um, he does also, mentioning that, talk of other animals and a human being's kind of obsession with believing that they're separate from their animal kin, which of course they're not. I've had a few kind of debates with old ahead of the curve. Might have thrown him into a few hypothetical scenarios here and there, which I'm sure he loved. But yeah, I happen to think that we can learn about being human from animals, really, over the other way around. I don't think we can learn much about the human beast from other humans, really. And mainly because when you look at how quite a lot of different animals, down to insects or even plant life, they have ways of living and managing and maintaining their lifestyles, let's say, or at least propagating their species in ways that we've just adopted. And we seem to think that, we're above them, or that they are, systems that we built. And it's like, I think they were more built in us. I don't really see it being of an innovation, but rather just an inevitability a lot of the time. So there are deterministic leanings within it. And I find it, or still find it hard now, to refute many of the claims in it. I just found it to be, a bit of the converted being sung to, in a sense, because I don't really believe in human beings getting anywhere on this. I think that's probably been fairly obvious from my reviews over the last few years now. But again, I suppose there are moments where I might slip into some deluded optimism and think that things are going to change or whatever. And it's nice to be brought back down to earth, which I think books such as this one can really help and assist with. And that isn't actually a pessimistic viewpoint, although it probably sounds like it. It's more to do with the fact that once you start to delude yourself into ideas or concepts such as hope, then really all you're doing is setting yourself up for a fall. And channeling such expectations behind any venture, be it, writing a book, for instance, or passing a test, maybe, or anything where you sense an achievement or a goal or an objective being met and owned. But then once you get it, the reality of it all sends you plummeting back down anyway. And because you've had these kind of starry-eyed or starry-based kind of delusions and fantasies behind the effort itself, all you're really going to be left with is sheer disappointment. And I think it's important to just have no expectations. I mean, hope is surely a value in some regards, or at least part of our morality in some other regards. But whether it belongs there and whether it's actually more harmful than it is good, who's to say? But I definitely think it is more harmful, mainly for the reasons I've just given. But again, yeah, there's a lot that Gray is refuting within this. And a lot I can't really argue with, if I'm honest. I actually did come to quite a few of the same conclusions. Writing Fubar, actually, I through Eric Archer, I kind of realized that the Judeo-Christian mindset, which is a very Western kind of concept, again, it ties back to Nietzsche and Jesus and all of this kind of stuff. It's based in the hubris of the individual, and the whole concept of the self is dubious at best anyway. I don't think there is really such a thing as it. Yeah, you might be genetically unique in some way, but that doesn't really mean anything if everyone else who's ever existed has been as well. It's just your amalgamation of genes, and that's it. I mean, I don't know whether that makes you different from anyone else really overall. I don't think it does when the same can be said for everyone else. So it kind of brings it all back down. Other things that are kind of mentioned, I mean, I think the guy was Polish and he was sentenced to stay in one of the camps in Soviet Russia. And this is like the opposite of man's search for meaning. This isn't like, oh, he went there and because of his suffering and because of his tragic scenario, he wasn't like, oh, you just need to find, wherever there's a will, there's a way, or he who can, what is it, bear any how can find a why, or bear any, I don't know. But really, this guy's experience was actually the opposite of that. I think there is a moment where every man or woman will snap and they will give up. Even suicide and the escape appeal of that will be debunked, or at least shattered for that person, because they're so down. They've been beaten, they've been exposed to so many horrific acts of violence that they're just despondent in thought and mind and spirit. So it's not, the whole triumph of the human spirit or any of that crap. It's more just the sheer lack of anything humane existing ever again. So yeah, it was mentioned that this whole, free will and purpose and all this kind of stuff, it's an existential kind of cope, I would say, a lot of the time. And although it can be useful to some degree, it's certainly not moving away from delusion. So I suppose you have to take that as you will, or as you don't will, let's say. But yeah, I mean, I find books like this to be very refreshing, because they do ground me again, and they remind me that it's very easy to get pulled into delusional outlooks, mainly because our heads are full of false imaginings, and though we may be at the mercy of such imaginings and find it very difficult to walk away from them, I mean, especially when you consider how really even something like language is something really where the unbelievability of reality is so difficult for us to bear that we have to break it down into language, to labels, in a sense, in order to just understand just a tiny speck of it. And again, I mean, how we can purportedly be seeking truth when that truth in itself is already demonstrative of our really limited outlook and of our perception in general. And Gray's other, arguments in it are saying that animals don't have this, and perhaps that is the reason we seem to think that we are separate from them, be it whether we're above or below, or in the middle, or just different. Really, it's perhaps it should be something that we learn from them, or that we try to learn from them whilst they're still around, because we're making a pretty good fucking go of it, trying to obliterate every other species that's ever existed, apart from us, of course. And even with us, we're trying to, evolve through biotechnology, it seems. So maybe we're trying to get rid of ourselves at the same time. Who knows? I mean, it is like we're trying to create the gods that we once believed in. Again, science, as Gray would mention, is also based on a lot of religious faith. The whole idea of Silicon Valley creating immortality or amortal beings, as Yuval Noah Harari has suggested in Homo Deus, his follow-up book to Homo Sapiens. Even that whole idea, I mean, it's born from Christian thinking, mainly because, in the afterlife, you'll get to live with your loved ones and you're immortal and all of this kind of stuff. It's everlasting, it's eternal and all this kind of thing. But so is the whole concept of being immortal, which is a ludicrous prospect within an organic reality. To be honest, even if such a thing were achieved, it doesn't take away from natural disaster and from what the planet is capable of doing or just being in general. Like, that's the thing, it moves too far away from that reality and seems to believe in some concrete vision, whereas nothing is ever concrete, nothing is ever as still as it may appear. It's everything's ever changing. There's some references to Gaia, I think it's pronounced. I'm not too schooled on that principle of thought, but the general idea is that the Earth itself is a regulated system, and that's how it actually, it works on a certain kind of different layer in the ecosystem. It all kind of is interconnected and those kind of things. And I think there is evidence to lay claim to that as well, scientific evidence. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm waffling a bit, but yeah, I think it's a fucking great read. I've really, I don't know, I get an inner calm from reading these pieces. Mainly, maybe it is something to do with a confirmation bias. I don't know, maybe, but I don't think so. It is nice to know that there are other people who are just kind of suspicious, I suppose, of certain outlooks of the human animal, especially their gluttony for delusion, for fantasy and things like that. And yeah, they're few and far between to find, especially living ones. I think the guy himself is like 73 now or whatever. And because this book did come out nearly 20 years ago, I'd be very intrigued to see what else he's written ever since. I think there is another one that has a similar title to do with animals, which I'm definitely going to pick up at some point. I'd like to see, because I think that one came out, I don't know when it came out, but it was, I think, at least 10 years ago. So, that would mean that it's had 10 years since Straw Dogs first came out. And yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone, really, especially, people who watch this. And yeah, if any of you guys have read it already, let me know your thoughts on it. I'll be intrigued to know what got to you whilst reading it, I suppose, because there were a number of things that I was kind of making partial notes to, but then it all kind of came to its own by the end. And the main one that is, the concentration camp in Nazi Germany seemed to stick in my mind for some reason. But there were a lot of others where it's just like, it's interesting to view it, especially when it's like debunking modern concepts of human liberalism and how preposterous they really are, and how things become the norm, I suppose. I mean, morality is so fragile, and so determined by the era. It wasn't even that long ago where homosexuality would be viewed as immoral. And in some societies, it still is. So, you know, and we look at that now and think, well, that's ridiculous. You know, I mean, who could ever lay claim to such a thing? And there are past generations. You know, look back into Roman times, where it was that was selling. It was the highest form of love at that period. So where's the fucking morality throughout history when things are so susceptible to change, much like truth itself? Where it's once the whole thing is exposed through an historical lens, you're just kind of like, well, what's left then? Is it all deluded, or is I don't know. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. It's a pleasure to talk about this book once again, and I'd like to know, yeah, your insights. So yeah, cheers. Hope you're all doing well. I'll see you soon. Bye.